Good evening, everyone, and I want to thank you for welcoming you to our program tonight. I'm Sarah, the Public Services Librarian with the Adams County Library System, and I am super excited to introduce everybody to Ted Knorr. At first things first, though, everybody, we are in webinar mode, so you are muted. Any questions for Ted, please put in the chat or the Q&A. I also would like to thank our sponsors for this evening, Barley Snyder Attorneys and James and Kathy Gardner. Few other housekeeping little thing is at the end of the program tonight, I will be pulling the winner of the jersey out of this bucket. So, and whoever wins, the library will contact tomorrow. So Ted Knorr has been a member of the Society for American Baseball Research, or SABR, since 1979 and a member of SABR's Negro League Committee since 1988. He is the founder of the Jerry Malloy Negro League Research Conference and hosted it 4 times in Harrisburg. He also worked with the Harrisburg Senators, Lancaster Barnstormers, and York Revolution to establish annual Negro League nights in those municipalities. He is not a writer, but recently authored a short biography of Rap Dixon for SABR, contributed to an article on great outfields to SABR's 2018 National Pastime publication, and penned a chapter in Todd Peterson's 2020 book, The Negro Leagues Were Major League. So Ted, take it away.
Thank you, Sarah. Now I got to share my screen. This is the real test. I think I passed. Okay, well, welcome to tonight's talk. And I look at tonight's talk as if there's 3 segments. The first, I've been asked to talk about Negro League Baseball in the Gettysburg and Harrisburg, York area. So that's what I'm going to start with. And then I'm going to move into a talk on the Negro Leagues as a major league. And then my third component, and I hope it's the equal of the first 2, if I may flatter myself, or even better, if I may flatter you guys, that'll be the question and answers that I'm really looking forward to. But just to get your minds in the right place, I want you to put this thought in your head. The last victims of the segregation of baseball prior to 1947 are us, because we don't know the Ty Cobbs and the Babe Ruths like we do from Major League Baseball during that same period of time. Nobody got hurt more than the players, of course, the people who were denied an opportunity to make a living in the way their talents provided. But we too are missing part of the baseball history of this country. Uh-oh. Now what am I doing wrong? There we go. There's about 40 black baseball teams in the area between Harrisburg and York, from the Susquehanna River to Gettysburg. And I've listed 9 here, and I'm only going to talk about a couple of them, except to say there are 2 or 3 in Gettysburg. You'll see a question mark next to Gettysburg there for the 3rd team down. I'm not convinced they weren't a Harrisburg team. But there's 2 in Carlisle, 2 in Shippensburg, 2 in Chambersburg. Well, did I say 2 in Carlisle? There's 10 in Carlisle. Harrisburg has 17. That's the municipality with the most. That first ball club on this list, the Monrovian Baseball Club, they were one of the 2 participants in the oldest box score of which I'm aware of in Harrisburg. And these are 2 marvelous teams. The 3 players that I have highlighted in red all have Pennsylvania historic markers. On the Harrisburg side, you'll see a player named, a player named Daniel Chester. His brother was T. Morris Chester, who was the first and one of the very few African-American Civil War correspondents. So he has a marker. On the visiting Philadelphia Pythian side, the manager is a gentleman named Jacob White. He attended school at the Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia, and today that school is known as Cheney University, the oldest historic Black college in the country. The last player with a marker is Octavius Cato, and unfortunately, 4 years after this game, he earned his marker. He was a good baseball player, but a much greater citizen. Encouraging the vote for African Americans, he was actually assassinated on Election Day, 1871. So you see, the game was not a pitcher's duel. The Philadelphia team wins 59-27 over the Harrisburg Monrovians. Another team we meet in the area is the 1890, and it says Cuban Giants here. They were born in 1885. They're the first professional African-American team in the country. And in 1890, they located to York to play their games. They used the name the Colored Monarchs of the Diamond, just a beautiful name. And they have two Harrisburgers on their roster. Down here is Jack Fry, and not in the picture is a catcher named Clarence Williams. One of their opponents, and here's someone, I'm not sure who he is, but he's in a York Colored Monarchs jersey that was auctioned off by the York Revolution, I think in 2019. One of the opponents in the Interstate League of the York Colored Monarchs was the Harrisburg Ponies. This was the minor league team in Harrisburg, today known as the Senators. What I want to point out here, this is very intriguing historical information. We all know, or most of us know, Jackie Robinson and Pee Wee Reese were teammates in 1947 when Jackie crossed the color line. And that's the first instances of teammates, one black, Jackie, and one white, Pee Wee, where they both go on to the Hall of Fame. But 57 years before Jackie and Pee Wee, the Harrisburg Ponies became the first team within the baseball universe, professional or amateur, to have a pair of teammates, one black, Frank Grant on the left there, and one white, Huey Jennings on the right. They both go on to the Hall of Fame. It took Frank a lot longer than Jackie or Pee Wee or Huey. But in 2006, when Frank Grant went into the Hall of Fame, this pair of ponies were the first to be immortalized in such fashion. Here's another local guy. This is Jake Stevens. He's born just outside of York, Pleasureville. It's near where the Harley-Davidson plant is today, if you're familiar with York. But Jake went on to just less than 20-year career in the Negro Leagues on some of the greatest teams ever. Hilldale, the Pittsburgh Crawfords, the Homestead Grays. And his forte, as pictured, was his glove. He would compare, and I know many of you, maybe most of you, aren't old enough to remember Mark Belanger from the late 60s and early 70s on the Orioles, but Mark Belanger and Jake Stevens were the same player. Not much of a bat, but spectacular glove. Also in York, if you know where William Penn High School is, the York City High School, right across from that is a place called Penn Park. Back in 1903, this pitcher, Danny McClellan, hurled what is considered the first perfect game in the Negro League history. Now, the reason for the quotes around Negro League is the actual league doesn't form until 1920, but this was a black team, the Cuban ex-Giants, playing the local Penn Park white team, and Danny only needed to face 27 batters. Later that year, that same team, the Cuban ex-Giants, played in the Colored World Series, where they defeated the Philadelphia Giants. The game 6 of that series takes place on City Island in Harrisburg in 1903. They've played baseball on City Island since 1890. I don't know if you can name a place where baseball, and for some of that years, in a major league level. After all, the Negro Leagues are indeed a major league now. The City Island ballpark has got a legendary status that few places can match in the country. And this is my next to final screen for local Negro League Baseball. This is a picture of the 1924 Harrisburg Giants. This is a major league team. From 1924 through 1927, they're in the Eastern Colored League, which was more something like the American League was to the National League in the majors. This was the second winningest team in their 4-year experience in the league. And in 1927, it was the highest paid team in all of black baseball. And I'd be remiss if I didn't point out a couple people here. This guy in the middle of the back row is a gentleman named Colonel Struthers, Colonel being his first name. He was the owner, and some people say, this is one of them things very difficult to prove, but he may have been the first African-American to wholly own a major league team, this Harrisburg Giant team. To his right or left is the great right fielder, Rap Dixon. And I'll talk about him later, I hope. He played right. Oscar Charleston over here, back row, far right. This is the center fielder, and he's in the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. And in the front row, second in from the left, is Fats Jenkins, and he wasn't fat, but he was the left fielder, and he's also in the Basketball Hall of Fame. He was captain of a great team called the New York Renaissance Five. Now, this list I've kind of gerrymandered a little bit, knowing I was going to speak about the local teams. These are the 7 Negro League teams with the highest winning percentage that played at least 273 games. And I picked that weird number because that's all the Harrisburg Giants played. But you can see there's only 6 teams in Negro League history between 1920 and 1948 that had a better record than the Harrisburg Giants. Sadly, the Giants never won the pennant. They finished second a couple times, but they could not catch the Hilldale Club. You see them just above them. Okay, and now I want to get as local as possible. And I failed. I couldn't get us into Gettysburg. However, these are 2 major league games advertised in the Carlisle paper. In 1924, on August 11th, the New York Lincoln Giants played the Harrisburg Giants at a place called Biddle Field, which I'm assuming some of you know where it is. I think it still exists. I think it still exists for athletic endeavors, which is rather amazing. This 1924. The next one, June 12th, that's the following year, and the Harrisburg Giants played the Atlantic City Bacharach Giants. All 3 of these teams were in the Eastern Colored League, and that has now been declared by Major League Baseball as a major league. Okay, so that's enough of the local stuff. Now, this is almost what I wanted to talk about when I was invited a year ago, a couple of days ago. I was going to talk about the top 10 reasons why the Negro League should be considered a major league. But a funny thing happened. The past year wasn't all that funny, but a spectacular event happens in December. And now my talk is going to have to be a little bit different. Major League Baseball, as defined by Major League Baseball, consisted of 6 leagues. And that definition was created in 1969, although the expression major leagues dates back to 1890. But the definition included the 2 existing leagues, the National League and the American League. It also included, and I'm glad it did, 4 long defunct leagues, the American Association, the Union Association, the Players League, and the Federal League. They've all been out of baseball for over 100 years. But those 6 leagues made up Major League Baseball up until last December. Before December came around, last January, this book was published. And I'm very proud to have been a part of it. I think in my introduction, it mentioned I'm not a writer. And if you read my writing, you'd agree with that. But I did write a chapter in this book. And the name of the chapter was The Top 10 Reasons Why the Negro Leagues Should Be Declared a Major League. And of course, the book itself took its title, more definitive, The Negro Leagues Were Major Leagues. Within a year of the publication of this book, and I don't mean to overreach the claim here, but it is a fact that for 50 years, the definition of the major leagues was static at these 6 leagues. But on December 16th of last year, Major League Baseball announced that they were going to recognize 7 Negro leagues existing between 1920 and 1948 as a major league. So all of a sudden, instead of 6 leagues, only 2 active, there's 13 major leagues, only 2 active. So this is my new title, The Negro Leagues Were a Major League. And we're here at the Gettysburg Library through the miracle of Zoom on April 1st, 2021. I'm not going to bore you with too much, but I do want to talk about a couple of factors that make a league major. The only clue we have from the committee back in 1967 through 69 that decided that those 6 leagues were indeed major was the reason they used to deny a 7th league that a lot of baseball historians think should have been included, and that's the National Association of 1871 through 1875. But this committee decided their schedule was too erratic and their procedures were not sufficient. Now, I have 4 other opinions here, but I'm just going to talk about the consensus just to give you a feel for what it takes to be a major league. Player quality, having a schedule and sticking to it, having teams in major cities, having media coverage, having the newspapers cover what you're trying to do, and then finally, some stability within the league. Now, those 4 defunct leagues that I spoke of, we can see them here a little more closer. The American Association lasted for 10 years. The Union Association and the Players League 1 year each, and the Federal League for 2 years. These 4 leagues then were around for 12 years and 14 seasons. The 7 Negro Leagues are around, and I wish I had this on my screen. Let me see if I can do the math. They were around for 29 years, 1920 through 1948. And I want to say 48 seasons, but that's from memory. I don't guarantee that. But let's compare now the defunct Negro Leagues to the defunct major leagues. In longevity, I think I just covered, the Negro Leagues are around for 29 years compared to 12. 48 seasons compared to 14, and 25,000 games that we have records for compared to 7,000. So longevity, we will check off. Certainly the Negro Leagues are major. In talent, 32 Hall of Famers played in those defunct Negro Leagues. 22 Hall of Famers played in the defunct majors. Now that difference doesn't seem as great as 2 or 3 times, so we need to look a little deeper. There's almost 14 Hall of Famers in an average year in the Negro Leagues, where there was only 4 Hall of Famers in an average year in the defunct majors. And last, the impact of these leagues on the modern game. Well, we're going to look at a few more factors than this, but the only one you need to see is the Negro Leagues continue as a major league through 1948, and they do continue on until 1961, whereas those defunct major leagues are out of business by the start of World War I. Okay, another way to look at the Negro Leagues as a major league is Ken Burns in his documentary, Jackie Robinson. He interviews the historian of baseball, John Thorne. And John points out that black baseball, the Negro Leagues, brought speed and power to Major League Baseball, in addition to base stealing, sacrifices, and daring base running. So, leaning on John's somewhat of a definition, let's see if Negro Leaguers, since Jackie Robinson crossed the line, have had an impact in home runs, stolen bases, and the sacrifice bunt. Well, what you see here are the 10 most prolific home run hitters in baseball since 1947. Sadly, only 2 of the 10 would have been permitted to play prior to 1947. So I think we can say with confidence that the introduction of the Negro Leaguers into the majors certainly increased the home runs. Stolen bases, well, there's actually nobody in the top 10 that would have been permitted to play prior to 1947. Brett Butler with 558 steals, more steals than any major leaguer since Max Carey. So clearly the Negro Leaguers have impacted in that facet of baseball. And lastly, as Earl Weaver found out and demonstrated all the way to Cooperstown, the use of the sacrifice bunt is no longer the smartest strategy, because you can hit a home run for 3 runs or steal that base without losing an out. But just to complete our look here, of the 10 most successful sacrifice bunters since 1947, 5 of them would have been banned from playing the game in the majors prior to 1947. Okay, looking from another perspective, in 1946, by definition, 0% of baseball was non-white or Negro Leaguers. The most recent data I have available, 41%. That's 4 players in every game in the starting lineups, on average, were non-white or would have been Negro Leaguers had it not been for integration. Similarly, 48% of the most valuable players since 1947 have been Black, Latino, or Asian. They would not have been permitted to play prior to 47. Now, just an aside, there were about 4 Latinos in Major League Ball in 1946, but they were not Latinos of obvious African descent. The color barrier really wasn't cultural, it was racial. Other measures, 43% of the Hall of Famers, beginning with Jackie, would not have been permitted to play prior to 47, and 49% of the first ballot Hall of Famers would have had to be Negro Leaguers had it not been for the integration of the game. 2 more statistics, and I know they're tough for some people and others love them, but we can measure. There's measurables now that we can show that the Negro Leagues were a major league. And among those measurables is the thing called the slash line. And that is the batting average, the on-base percentage, and the slugging percentage of the entire league. And you can see between 1920 and 1948, the American and National League hit 275. The Negro Leagues, we now have good solid data, hit 273. That's the same number when you're talking about 300 to 400 players in each of these leagues. A discrepancy by 2 points is no discrepancy at all. And similarly, the on-base percentage and slugging follow along. They're the same slash lines in both black baseball and white baseball. Now, here's what gets a little more controversial. These are 6 historians with their compilation of the record between Negro League teams and Major League teams. And you'll see that all 6 have the Negro League teams winning more than their fair share. Ken Burns actually has it at 70%. I talked to Ken once. We were on the same program, and I was very excited. I said, Ken, do you have box scores? Thinking he probably did, or at least some. He said, box scores? This is oral history. Well, upon closer examination, my best guess is when you had a true Negro League team versus a true Major League team, especially in the pitcher in both instances, they split their games pretty much right down the middle. Okay, one more reason, and then I hope I'm not too, I think I'm probably a little earlier than I should be, but that's good. It's going to give you guys plenty of time to ask good questions. But the number one reason, and this was last year before it actually happened, why I feel the Negro League should be designated as Major League is very simple. Simply the right thing to do. In 2020, for all its racial divisive activities, one right thing that I know was done was on December 16th of last year. And I was unaware. I knew they were thinking of it. It had already made national news that they were thinking of doing so. And of course, this is not the kind of thing that you could think about and then not do. But I had no idea when I opened up the computer on December 16th. Major League Baseball, the commissioner, Manfred, announced that they were going to recognize the Negro Leagues as a major league. I have had very few days like that in my life as emotional. But I'm very happy that it's happened. They are going to incorporate the statistics, and that's going to take some doing. But I wouldn't be surprised if it took 2 years. It might be done in 6 months. But the complete integration of Negro League Baseball and Major League Baseball is going to occur. So, without any further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I hope we have some good questions.
Yes. Donald would like to know, have you met John Thorne?
Sure. Yeah, John's a friend and a great guy. I mean, we'd all love to be the official historian of baseball. There's nobody, in my opinion, more qualified than John Thorne. And he's a fair man. He underwent a bit of a metamorphosis with this decision. And he and baseball came to the right decision. I'm very happy. And if I had any effect on John, I'm proud of that fact.
Jess says, very interesting jersey display behind Mr. Knorr. Who is the player?
Okay, well, the jerseys, let me see if I can not ruin things. There's Jackie's jersey. And then you just barely see behind that beautiful picture that we're going to talk about, Satchel Paige's jersey next to Satch, and you can't see this. This is obstructed. Mark McGuire's jersey. I have 10 lockers in my basement. Mine, Bill Mazeroski's, Josh Gibson's, Satchel, Jackie, I skipped him, Mark McGuire, Babe Ruth is over here. And then right behind me is the outfield of the Harrisburg Giants that we spoke about, Fats Jenkins, Oscar Charleston. And then the third one, and that's the answer to who's in that picture. That's Rap Dixon. Rap Dixon was a marvelous outfielder who should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to run at the mouth just a little bit here. I seem to have saved some time to do this. To get into the Hall, you need to have statistics, opinions, and legends. And Rap's statistics are without question. Once you notice that the Negro Leagues and the Major Leagues have the same slash line, that means that more or less the statistics are comparable. And Rapp hit 325 with 21 homers for every 162 games he played. He also stole, according to Seamheads, and they do an algorithm to come to this. So I can't defend that. And I don't think that algorithm, well, let me just give you that. He steals 29 bases a year based on his statistics. Since statistics aren't kept in every box score, Seamheads says that should be 38. I can live with the 29. He also has a on-base plus slugging of 944. Is that right? It's the highest of any player not in the Hall, Negro League or Major League, that batted as many times as Rapp. So he's got the statistics. The opinions, the first three outfielders in the Hall from the Negro Leagues are Monty Irvin, who ranks, he's the first one. He ranks Rapp fifth best outfielder. Cool Papa Bell puts him in his all-time outfield. And in both cases, everyone else in their outfield are Hall of Famers. And the best one is Oscar Charleston, the jersey right in the middle here, his teammate for probably 6 or 7 years. He ranks Rapp Dixon as the greatest African-American outfielder he ever saw and the greatest center fielder he ever saw. So that's pretty good opinions. In terms of legends, and I won't dwell too much more on Rapp, but in 1927, Rapp goes to Japan with a beautiful team organized by Biz Mackey, who's a Hall of Famer, and including Andy Cooper, who's a Hall of Famer. And they only had one non-winning game in Japan. And many people in Japan think that tour, as much as the Babe Ruth tour 8 years later, helped create the Nippon Professional Baseball League. 2 years after that, Rapp cracks 14 consecutive hits. That's going to be a major league record if it holds up. The major league record is 12. In 1930, Rapp hits the first home run by an African-American in Yankee Stadium. And I'll quit on this one. So to me, many people call Yankee Stadium that house that Ruth built. I call it the house that Dixon rehabbed. So I'm going to quit while I'm ahead. And is there another question?
Diane would like to know, can you go more in depth about baseball history on City Island?
Oh, sure. In 1890, if you know Harrisburg, and I forget the name of the bridge, it might have been the People's Bridge, but I'm not a Harrisburg historian. But the Walnut Street Bridge, what we call today, it's a walking bridge that gets you from the mainland to the island. And in fact, you can't go the whole way across to your guys' shore because the hurricane or ice slide took the rest of the bridge away. But that bridge opens in 1890, and that opens up a degree of commerce on this island. And of course, the biggest feature of that was a baseball park. At the time, it was called Harrisburg Athletic HAC. I can't call the C. Let's say club. I don't think that was it. But Harrisburg Athletic Club. I think that is it. Field. So that field and that home plate right where it is today opened up in 1890. So in 1890, the main tenant was the Harrisburg Ponies, and they today would be called the Harrisburg Senators. Now, remember, this is the middle of the Susquehanna River. There's economic reasons, ebbs and flows of the owners of the teams, and there's weather reasons that sometimes baseball was not playable on that hunk of real estate. So baseball hasn't been played continually since 1890. However, home plate still stands where it was in 1890. And Major League Baseball was played there from 1924, when the Eastern Colored League is now called a Major League, through 1948, because even though the Harrisburg Giants fell out of the Eastern Colored League in 1928, Negro League teams came to City Island to play until baseball integrated. And in fact, until even in the 50s, there was a great team. They won the Northern Division in 1954 of a league called the Eastern Negro League. And they were also called the Harrisburg Giants. And there's about 5 of those marvelous players still with us. And one of the factors that makes them marvelous, before the New York Yankees integrated, or the Philadelphia Phillies, or the Detroit Tigers, the Harrisburg Giants in 1954, having their first practice sessions at the same time the Supreme Court was deciding Brown v. Board of Education, the 1954 Harrisburg Giants were fully integrated. About a third of the team in an otherwise all-black league was white. I hope that covers enough of that island's history for you.
Patty would like to know, what do you attribute to the fact that Central PA had so many Negro League teams?
Well, looking where they were, and really the only ones that have double figures is Harrisburg, Carlisle, and I don't think even York gets to double figures itself. This is between, and keep in mind, this is between 1860 and 1900. Those were pockets of integration, and that might be too favorable a word, but certainly places where African Americans had made households. This was a rough life. I don't mean to minimize that, but and also the Underground Railroad certainly came up. The Susquehanna River, Columbia was a main terminal. So African migration in the 19th century came right through central Pennsylvania, Columbia to Harrisburg, and then on Williamsport on to Canada. So that's the best I can tell you there. And also the transportation. Harrisburg is a transportation mode place where you have railroads and highways and even the river. So that attracted a lot of African Americans to that city. And 17 of the 40 or so teams that I talked about in the 19th century were in Harrisburg.
Brian would like to know, how will they handle bringing the records together from the Negro Leagues to the Major League records?
Well, let me first direct everyone who wants to go on your spare time when this is over. There's a marvelous website called seamheads.com. When you go there, you want to look for their Negro League database. That data is new, although, within the past 20 years. It actually was created by a $250,000 grant from the Hall of Fame to a group of people, 30, 40 people, of which I was one. I was just a bozo on that bus, but I was on it. But what they've done is take newspaper box scores from the black press and the white press, game by game, and they feel, this is Seamheads now, that they have 80% of all Negro League games. I mentioned 25,000 games played between 1920 and 1948. They have roughly 20,000 box scores, if I'm doing the math correctly. So they feel pretty good, and they're trying to get the rest. These box scores are hidden. But so I really feel pretty good that they have a sound, comparable. It's not the same thing as having box scores sent to league offices like Major League Baseball has done since 1876. But it is done by an impartial third party, the newspapers, and scrutinized by a qualified panel of people, even to this day. Now Seamheads does it. So it's a matter of convincing Major League Baseball, the Elias Sports Bureau, which has been one of several, but certainly the principal one now, that has done a 99% plus their Price Waterhouse can't beat them in terms of the precision of baseball stats. They still make mistakes. Hack Wilson has 191 RBIs now, I think in 1930, where we used to think he only had 190. Ty Cobb lost a hit or two from his total. So this is not, it's not as precise as rocket science, but, and that's existing MLB. But those two groups, Major League Baseball and the Elias Sports Bureau, have to come to grips with seam heads and probably baseballreference.com. And hopefully, and I'd love to be in that room, some people from SABR. And they should be able to figure out which stats should count. And let me just give you one of the mysteries. The 1931 Homestead Grays, many people consider the greatest of all the Negro League teams. And the 32 Crawfords, the same thing, the Pittsburgh Crawfords. If it's not the Grays, it might be them. And the Kansas City Monarchs, for part of the time, are independent teams, meaning they're not in the 7 approved leagues. So there's work that needs to be done to determine which stats do they want to count. I'd like to see them use the filter for Negro Leagues on the Seam Heads database and live with that, 1920 to 1948.
Jared is wondering, what concerns do you have regarding the ability to maintain the recognition of the historical significance of the need for Negro Leagues?
That's a very good question, and I'm not a sociologist. I like to think that, and I think what Jared's going to here is the social conditions that required a league like the Negro Leagues to exist are purely a function of the racism of this country. I don't think we're going to lose sight of that. Let's put it this way. The decision to make the Negro Leagues a major league is self-serving by Major League Baseball. There's no way around that. But it's also a thing that had to be done, and I'm eternally grateful that it happened. It's really up to us. Major League Baseball, I don't think is going to run from its past. Certainly its past is more visible after December 16th and that decision than it was before it. So is the fear that history might be lost and whitewashed, for want of a better expression. So I don't think that I don't have that fear. I think there's more of a light on the history of the Negro Leagues and the reasons for it now than there was before. But that's a very good question. Was it Jared that asked it? Very good question. And it's up to people like you and the other 30 in the room to make sure that we don't all of a sudden think that the Negro Leagues were a major league that ate the same peaches and cream that the American and National League did, because if that would have been the case, there wouldn't have been a need for separate leagues.
Tanya says she's watching with her husband, who grew up in the area and didn't know anything about the Negro Leagues. Does Pennsylvania recognize the leagues? She's just wondering if there's a physical place to visit for information.
Another very good question. Let me talk about 3 places, none of which are in Pennsylvania. The best collections of Negro League data and paraphernalia. One's in Birmingham. I have yet to be there, and that's the Negro Southern League Museum, but it's fully stocked. And don't ask me about this. I'm not prepared to talk about it, but it could well have been in Harrisburg. But the other 2 are the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, and I've been there 4 or 5 times. That's a beautiful place to go, and it tells the story. And then, of course, up at the end of the Susquehanna River, Cooperstown, New York, has got a spectacular display and a spectacular collection of, I forget the exact number, I think it's 330 players are in the hall, we need more Negro League players in the hall. But a place you could go in Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, they do have a sports museum, the Heinz Center, marvelous because Pittsburgh was a mecca of the Negro Leagues with both the Crawfords and the Grays and the Keystones before them, and the Crawford Grill and the Negro National League 2 being born in Pittsburgh. There should be a museum there. Well, and there is an overall museum, but that's a place to go. I hate to make a promise like this, but I love to show Harrisburg. In Harrisburg, we have the island. We have, and maybe Sarah in the museum next year. I don't think it'd be a popular thing this year, but I would love to conduct a bus tour. The island itself, the place where Oscar Charleston lived in the city, and then there's another ballpark that's no longer existing, but still it's a good place to go. There's probably a few other places, and then there's Steelton. Steelton is just a marvelous town, and that's where the man in the picture behind me is buried. And we put a marker on his grave. So one of his houses, I think, still stands. Before the pandemic, it did. I've heard some talk that maybe it doesn't, which they're lucky I was sleeping. But anyway, so there's places to see in Steelton, most prominently his grave, but there's also where Steel High plays football was a baseball field. So there's things around Harrisburg to see. In York, Penn Park still exists. Jake Stevens that we mentioned has a grave. You could probably put together a tour of grave sites, but we missed the boat on a beautiful museum.
Russ would like to know if you know much about Turkey Stearns.
Well, I laugh because I obviously know Turkey Stearns. I've been to Detroit twice. I know his two daughters and his granddaughter. There's a biography which you want to see. It's written by a friend of mine, Tom Kern. It's on the SABR page, saber.org, I believe, and then go to biography. So you can read all about Turkey. But what I will say, in my opinion, the three greatest outfielders of the Negro Leagues are Turkey Stearns, Cristobal Torriente, and Oscar Charleston, who lived and played in Harrisburg, lived here for probably 10 years and played here for just 4. But so Turkey Stearns, he's one of them power speed guys. Depending on when they compile the list, he might be the all-time home run leader in the Negro Leagues. I think it's going to be Josh Gibson, but again, it depends which games get counted. Stearns, Gibson, and Mule Suttles will probably be 1, 2, 3 in some order, and perhaps Oscar Charleston, because his career was so long. He probably would be 4th in terms of home run rate, but he could be anywhere from 1st to 4th, depending on which box scores get considered major.
Well, speaking of Josh Gibson, Michaela would like to know your thoughts on him because he is one of her favorite Negro League players.
Well, Oscar Charleston, in my opinion, again, I say that because I'm right in front of his uniform, but he's the greatest Negro League player. And he was the second dead one to go in. The early players into the Hall of Fame were all alive, and that's why they got in, and that was a good reason. But the first dead player to go in was Josh Gibson. And Josh dies in, I want to say January of 46. Ironically, just 2 months, or is it 47? It's 47. 2 months before Jackie crosses the color, breaks the color barrier. So Josh didn't even get to see it, let alone be the one. Some people say he died of a broken heart. I think that's a little romantic, but clearly he was disappointed. But Josh, because of the number of games Negro League teams played, which was only about 60 or 70 league games a year, he will be nowhere near Babe Ruth, but hopefully a little more than Gabby Hartnett. Gabby Hartnett hit the most home runs by a catcher in Major League Baseball during the segregated era. Depending on which games get counted or future games found, Josh Gibson could be the greatest home run hitting catcher of that era. But again, he won't match Ruth in total homers. Only Ruth hits homers at a faster rate during the segregated era. And here's where Gibson comes in. We think of him as a power hitter, and he was. But his lifetime batting average is exceeded only by Ty Cobb, depending on how many at-bats you require. But he hit 361 for a career and still hit over 200 homers on his Hall of Fame plaque, almost 800 homers, although I don't believe that. But Josh Gibson is possibly the greatest. I prefer Oscar, but Josh is no worse than 1B.
Dave is wondering what will be Henry Aaron's career home run totals after the inclusion of Negro League statistics.
And here we go again. These are good questions. I think it'll be 755 home runs, and that's what it should be. He does hit between 5 and 10, depending on how you count, in 1952. Right now, there's no talk, and I would, I'm a Negro League fan, and I love the Negro Leagues, but I also have standards. In 1952, the Negro Leagues were no longer a major league. In other words, when Hank Aaron debuts in 54 with the Braves, that's his major league debut. Willie Mays, on the other hand, he debuts in 1948 for the Birmingham Black Barons. And they were the Negro League champs that year. Or did they lose? They made the World Series. I can't recall if they won or lose. They played the Homestead Grays, and I don't know who won. But anyway, Willie hit 1 home run that year that we found so far. So Willie's bottom line number will increase by 1.
Okay. And then Myra grew up in Homestead, so she's wondering, what can you tell us about Homestead baseball?
Well, my grandparents actually, they were in a section of town. It was called Munhall. Homestead and Munhall abutted where they abut. It's kind of difficult to tell one side of the line from the other. But Homestead's history goes back to the steel mill in baseball. And there was a team, and I can't remember what it was originally called, but by the 19-teens, certainly, they were called the Homestead Grays. They started out as a steelworkers team, and once they got beyond that, they were a semi-pro team, and then by the mid-20s, they're a professional team, and maybe, certainly one of the best in all black baseball, even though they were independent. One year, I think their record was something like 131-4. Now, they were playing less than major league schedules. This is the reason why there's nuances in bringing these statistics in. We do not want to bring in statistics that aren't comparable to the major league statistics of the era. We want to compare apples and apples. But the Homestead Grays, from that early period, owned by a Penn State grad named Cum Posey, who's in both the basketball and baseball Hall of Fames, they were one of the longest lasting, one of the most successful Negro League teams. They have, and I don't know the exact number, but they have they won 9 pennants in a row. So they have about 10 pennants. I think they have 2, maybe 3 World Series titles. It kind of depends on who won in 48. I can't remember, was it Homestead or Birmingham? But the Homestead Grays had, their only 2 comparable teams to them would be the Chicago American Giants, owned by Rube Foster, who founded the Negro Leagues, and the Kansas City Monarchs. One more comment for Pennsylvania. This is a good one. More Negro League games were played in Pennsylvania than any other state in the union.
I think that was all the questions.
Well, you wore me out.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. As we said in the promotion for the program, we do have a Homestead Grays jersey. And since if you registered through the library's website, I have put everybody who has registered here in this little basket. And so then sometime tomorrow, one of my coworkers here at the library will be contacting Diane Joyner about the jersey, as she is the winner of the jersey. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Ted. This was very informative, and we have recorded this program, and so it will be debuting on the library's YouTube channel probably sometime tomorrow. So have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks for being here.